right, here we go. I am reviewing for my anthropology quiz number 1, or for module 1, I think. Yeah. So I'm just going to be reviewing my notes. This is not like a public live stream of any kind. Okay, so module 1 of anthropology. What is anthropology? Essentially, it is the study of humans. Anthropology is the study of humans, or just studying humans. That's all. There's 4 approaches to anthropology, 4 main approaches. So we got the holistic one, we have comparative, we have data-oriented, and then we have evolutionary. So what do these 4 approaches mean? So you could have the holistic approach, which is looking at humans as a whole. What do we all know about humans, like generalized information? And then we have comparative, which is comparing similarities and differences between like different societies. And then we have data-oriented. So this is from collecting data from direct contact with people, sites, etc., like fossils, or going directly to the city and talking to the people, talking to the locals there. And then there's evolutionary, which is the biological and cultural changes over time. So there's those 4. So basically, you could approach it through a general viewpoint. You could approach it through comparing our similarities and differences. You could approach it through data, like direct hard data, hard evidence. And then we could also look at the past, like how has society and humans evolved over time. So those are the 4 approaches to anthropology. For culture, let's define culture a little bit. That's the beliefs, traditions, customs, ideas learned as a society. So culture, the main thing to know about this is it's learned. It is not inherited from anybody. I will say, however, that the ability to learn in humans is inherited from our parents and ancestors. So we are able to learn about culture and all the aspects of culture, but it is not innate. It's not like inside us. We were not born with like knowing culture. We learn it through time. And a lot of anthropologists like to call humans as biocultural organisms. So meaning like we're biologically able to learn, and we learn culture as a result of our ability to learn. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 subfields of anthropology. I don't know why I put an H in parentheses, but maybe, well, we just won't know. Okay, so first we have biological, physical. So this is understanding ourselves in the world around us. So paleoanthropology, human biology, primatology, and others. A prime example of biological anthropology is Dr. Jane Goodall. She studies primates, monkeys. Yeah, and she's a really famous researcher in Nat Geo. I remember reading about her in Nat Geo. So yeah, it's pretty cool studying anthro and knowing that I already know her. That was so awkward. I'm just gonna move on. Cultural anthropology is contemporary populations. So kinship, social organizations, material life and tech, substance and economics, and cultural worldview. So basically just studying cultures, like worldview and different societies and stuff. I don't have any other way of explaining this, sorry. We have archaeology, perspectives on culture in the past. So we have prehistoric, historical, maritime, or underwater, classical, biblical, etc. So history, pretty much. And then there's linguistics, ways we communicate, language derivatives. So descriptive, comparative, historical language, and cultural identity. This is my favorite one. I'm really interested in languages. So this is definitely like the linguistics part of anthropology is definitely something I'm interested in and want to learn a lot more about. So the 4 subfields of anthropology are biological, physical, which is studying like us and the world around us, like in nature. And we have cultural, which is studying cultures, and anthropology, which is basic, or not anthropology, archaeology, which is essentially history, and then linguistics, which is like languages and the syntax of all of the ways we use to communicate to each other. And what is kind of cool about these 4 subfields is if you integrate them together, if you all like combine them together, you get applied anthropology. So it combines these subfields to make a difference in the world. So imagine, like biological anthropology, cultural archaeology, and linguistics, you can use that for applied anthropology. Basically, this is using anthropology to have a technical or like utilized effect on the world. Some examples could be medical, developmental, urban, forensics, and CRM, and like and such. Yeah. So we got the four subfields, and if you use those, you can create a difference in the world. So why are we studying anthropology? I'm just going to read my notes word for word. To understand human differences, understanding unfamiliar parts of culture and people, recognize interconnectedness of diverse cultures, and understand differences as a part of a global citizen. So in this ever evolving world, you need to know the differences of different cultures and different people, different ethnicities. And it's just really, really important to learn all of these as the more interconnectedness we get as a world, like as a country, as a world, as people, and understanding these differences and realizing that there are way more similarities inside those differences than there are just like bad differences or just strange out there differences. You come to know that a lot of these differences kind of communicate a strange sense of like similarity, and it's pretty cool to learn. And it's really, really, I think it's crucial to learn because a lot of us can focus a lot more on the differences between humans, and it can actually separate us a lot. And if we come to learn the similarities between humans and similarities between all of us as cultures in the world, it's really good to use that and I don't know, promote world peace and stuff and understand people. It's pretty cool. Okay, moving on. There's a point right here that I wrote in my notes that I already mentioned, but I just want to mention again because it's really important. Culture is learned; it is not innate. The natural biological abilities and impulses allow capacity for learning culture. So the term for learning culture is enculturation. And yes, the big thing here is that culture is learned. It's not in us when we were born. So, three things about culture. Culture is oh, that's the first thing. Okay, so I guess four things about culture. Culture, the second thing, culture is symbolic. So there are signs in culture, there are signs everywhere without a necessary or natural connection with the things they signify. For example, it's language. Language doesn't necessarily like signify anything. Like, sure, English is spoken in UK and the US, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if somebody speaks English, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're from America and like follow American culture and stuff. It's just a little simple, like it's tied into a culture, but it doesn't necessarily like have a direct, a direct tie to the culture. Culture is shared, so it's transmitted common experiences through groups. So yeah, it's shared. It's not like a singular thing. And it's integrated and holistic. So there's a core set of values, cultural ideas. If one part of a system changes, it affects other parts. Humans adapt and cope with environment through biology and culture. So basically, it's culture is very whole. It's not well, I'll go into it later, but it's as a whole. Like you can't change one part of culture without changing another. I'm trying to think of something like um for example, a big part of American culture, I guess, is Christianity. If you change that part of Christianity, like pretend you wiped out Christians, or like you just change like pretend Christianity didn't exist or something, then we wouldn't have Christmas. And Christmas is a big part of American culture. So yeah, I think that's a good example. Okay, so there's three types of general culture, or three types of culture. There's universal, general, and particular. So going into universal culture, it's biological universals. Oh, so there's two types of universal culture. There's biological and there's social. So biological universal culture would be long period of infant dependency, year-round sexuality, complex brain that enables use of symbols, languages, and tools. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my brain today. It's a Friday. Social universals include life in groups and same kind of family, some kind of family. So this is the type of stuff that you see everywhere in the world. Like it's not just in America. It's not just in certain like countries. You'll find that everywhere you see. It's a very universal thing. Like there's a lot of infant dependency, like a long period. There's year-round sexuality, complex brain. There's languages, and we got life in groups and some kind of family. Family and a group setting is definitely like seen everywhere in the world. Okay, and then we have general culture. This type of culture is spelled with a capital C. I don't know why, but I just wrote it down right with a capital C. So it occurs in certain time or places, but not all cultures have it. So, for example, the nuclear family in the U.S. not necessarily um, seen or common throughout the rest of the world. It could be, but not everywhere. And then why some beliefs and customs occur as generalities for like so this is general culture. We're talking about general culture, and the reason why uh, some parts of culture are generalized and not universal is because it can be inherited from common ancestors or domination. Yeah, domination or diffusion. So it could be passed down from a common ancestor, or it could be given to a certain country through like colonization, domination, stuff like that. And also could be a part of diffusion, which is like cultural borrowing. So I think a big example of this would be like bowing in Asia. It's definitely not universal, but it's definitely general. So I would just say, like, for example, it could have originated in China, and then diffusion allowed for countries like Vietnam, Japan, South Korea, North Korea to be bowing to each other. Or it could be a part of domination through military conquest, could be spread, like culture can be spread through that. Or it could just be common ancestors passing down, and wherever people go, they carry the culture with them. All right, the third and most narrow part of culture is particular culture, and this is spelled like um with a lowercase. Sorry, my mind blanked. So this is confined to a single group, place, society, and becoming increasingly rare due to globalization and individual invention. Individual invention is basically like solving similar problems with similar solutions. I'll get into that later, but I will give an example of particular culture. I think an example of particular culture would definitely be like the 4th of July, I think. And but that's kind of big. That's kind of big. I want to think of like a smaller one. I would definitely say here in Dothan, or not here in Dothan. I live in Auburn, but in Dothan, Alabama, there's a peanut festival, and it's a huge part of the culture there. And it's definitely a particular culture thing because I haven't heard of like a bigger peanut festival. It's like very, very specific to Dothan, Alabama. So I would say that's one of the examples. But again, like I said, it's becoming increasingly rare due to globalization and individual invention. So even if you have like a small part of culture, eventually it's really easily spread out and everybody's like celebrating it. Like I would assume that like certain cultural things start pretty small, but through like individual invention and globalization and just all that sharing, cultural sharing would be definitely more common in the future. Okay, so something to note about culture is public and individual. It's in the world and in people's heads. There's often conflict between ideal and actual or real culture. So, for example, culture is practiced out in public, but it's also your individual preference. So, like, I, okay, let's say one part of culture here in Auburn is studying, I guess. I don't know. I'm just trying to like make myself understand. So people study in groups out there, right? But I also decide to study here in my apartment, and it's just a personal thing. So it's practiced as a individual, but also practiced in public, and then it's in the world and in people's heads. So it's again, it's practiced out in the world, and it's part of the world. It's part of society, but it's also kind of like created in our heads. That's why it's reinforced in the world. Because if it was just in the world, it's just a world. But the fact that we have culture in our minds, in our beings, we definitely reinforce the culture and kind of like back it up so it keeps continuing and evolving and people keep learning about it. And then the third thing is it's often conflict between ideal and actual real culture. So certain people definitely have um, certain motives, and I will get into that like in like probably 2 minutes. So don't forget. Um, what it's trying to say is like ideal and real culture is quite different. There's a lot of ideas that we have about our culture that we really wish that culture was, but you know, like something in theory doesn't always equate something in actual practice. So we could have an idea of a culture in our head, but in practice, in real life, it out there in the real world, it doesn't actually like follow our cultural ideas. So like the culture in our heads doesn't necessarily like reflect the outside, or the outside doesn't necessarily reflect the inside. And cultures made and remade. Um, I don't know why this is so messy. So culture is made and remade. So yeah, we make up culture. It's all made up, but we remake it. We reinvent it. We influence it, and it changes pretty much every day. And the main thing is agency. So what is agency? Agency is the actions that individuals take in forming and transforming cultural identities. Yeah, so agency is just like what people do to make and remake culture. So I already said I was going to get into it in 2 minutes, but practice theory. So practice theory, it recognizes individuals within society have different motives. So you could want to follow the culture, but the culture might not reflect what you want. For example, some people's life goal is to be rich. They just want to be rich. You know, it doesn't matter what the culture says, they just want to be rich. So even if the culture is like they have certain morals or like certain universal morals or whatever, they don't care about that. They just want to be rich. But other people, they might be a philanthropist. They might want to help others. Other people might not care. Other people might like couldn't care less, and some people just want to hurt others. So it's definitely like different in a culture. Like you could want a culture to be something, but the reason why it's not like that in real life is because of practice theory. Just like people have different agencies. I'm so smart. I am so smart. Okay, last page. So we have cultural groups. There's two types. There's international and national, obviously. International extends beyond national boundaries, for example, Earth Day, or the World Cup, Olympics, and the United Nations, the UN. It's definitely a international culture, definitely shared across different countries. National is like really stuck to one culture or one country. So it's like beliefs, learned behavior patterns, values, and institutions shared by citizens of the same nation. Huge example, July 4th, and Bastille Day in France, and July 4th in here. Okay, let's talk about mindset when we're studying anthropology. So, the big bias when we're looking at anthropology is ethnocentrism. And what is ethnocentrism? Ethnocentrism is basically judging. Yeah, you shouldn't judge, but but a lot of people do. It's a bias, ethnocentrism. But it's a certain type of judgment. So it's basically viewing one's own culture as superior, using one's standards or values to judge others. I know it's terrible. We don't judge. We're not supposed to be judging. That's not what makes a girl hot. So an example of ethnocentrism is like if I were to study some remote culture who has a certain religion and they have certain practices or rituals to honor and show their faith to their God. And me as a Christian, I'm like, well, that's just stupid. Like, why would you worship like an elephant? Why would you worship a cow? Like, that's just kind of dumb. Also, it's barbaric because like that's just not what you're supposed to do. And um, yeah, that's not God, and you shouldn't be worshiping them. Like, that's ethnocentrism. Why? Because I'm judging. I'm basing my personal experiences, culture, and beliefs to judge others. So instead of doing that, I could have cultural relativism, which is evaluating culture not by outside standards, but in the context of the culture in which it occurs. So this allows for us to see more similarities than differences. How? So I gave the example of me judging like a certain culture's practices and way of worshiping whatever religion they're worshiping, and me being a Christian, using my standards to evaluate their culture, and that's not good. How can I fix this? Well, basically, I could put myself in their shoes, which is cultural relativism. I could be like, okay, well, if I was in that culture, well, I worship them, right? So of course I would do this ritual and I would do this ritual. I would like have certain practices to show my faith to my God. And isn't that the same thing as Christianity? Like Christians have certain rituals, have certain practices. We pray, we do certain things to show faith to our God. So isn't that the same thing pretty much? Like we shouldn't be judging based off of like what we do and just saying like, "Oh, that whatever they're doing is stupid, like, why would they do that?" It's the same thing. They're showing faith to their God. We're showing faith to our God. It's kind of the same thing. Seeing similarities like that really helps you understand the mindset of other cultures, and it definitely makes us see different cultures, like differences, as a positive rather than a negative. Because though we shouldn't really judge how, it's just like the point is that showing, um, they're practicing their culture. That's what we're doing too. It's just all the same thing. The difference is what makes it beautiful, or the world beautiful. Okay, off of my soapbox, we're gonna talk about the last thing. We have transmitting, which is culture changing. So when I said culture like is changing and evolving rapidly, that's transmission. We're transmitting cultures very fast. So, what allows for this? So, the primary mechanisms of culture changing, aka transmitting, is we got three of them. So, first is acculturation, which is ongoing exchange of cultural features between groups in continuous first-hand contact. For example, exchange or blending of foods, music, and clothing. Huge example of this is America, USA. We have a whole bunch of different immigrants. We got people like me, we got Asians, we got Hispanics, we got Middle Easterners, we have Europeans, and all of them are here. They'll make restaurants, they'll teach in schools, they'll make friends with each other, and all of that is beautiful because we get to share foods, we get to share music, clothing, culture with each other. So that's a direct contact. That's called acculturation. We're having direct contact with each other and we're exchanging cultures as a result of such. Okay, and then we have independent invention. I've already mentioned this a little bit before, and it's innovation and inventions for problems. Example, agricultural innovation, hunting methods, and weaving. So this changes culture how? It's just inventions. People and people just think of crazy stuff all the time. Like the other day I like invented how to like dry my clothes like super like, or no, not my clothes, my hair super fast. I was like doing this. I was like not using a towel or like a hair dryer, but I was like whipping my hair back and forth like Willow. And I think that's just a wonderful invention and it should be part of culture. Moving on, globalization is a series of processes that promote change and increasingly link and make nations mutually dependent. So I like to think of these as like kind of like political communications. Examples of this is production and distribution and finance. So yeah, kind of boring. Um, Kind of going back on it, primary mechanisms of transmitting is acculturation, which is like direct contact, exchanging cultures that way, and independent invention, which is like individuals in the group just come up with something just to solve problems. They do it independently, not really necessarily as a result of anything, and that causes a big change in culture. iPads, for example. I don't know why I use iPads and not iPhones, but we're just not going to talk about it. And then globalization, which is like countries having like contact and connections with each other, and using that, they get to change and borrow kind of like ideas off of each other and just kind of make the world a better place through differences and similarities. So yeah, that is module one of anthropology. I actually did write my notes on paper. as I should as a queen. And I'm gonna have this non-sponsored Celsius drink to take my test now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next live that I can do to review my notes and wish me luck on my test.